Hey lovely souls, it's Lee. Today we are talking about everything I know about understanding trauma. So like understanding mental health 101. If this were to be kind of the most simple, basic, straight to the point culmination of my last 10-15 years getting my master's in counseling psych, counseling in rural mental health settings with people with severe and persistent mental illness, coming out of the hospitalizations, having day treatment every day, meaning that they have to come to our program to step down out of inpatient treatment, to working and being trained in domestic violence, doing assessments on victims, and co-facilitating groups with men who have domestic violence charges, who then need to go through a program to remedy. And then to working with people coming straight out of incarceration and treatment centers. And this is all in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was there for the riots of George Floyd, and in the same neighborhoods in North Minneapolis where that shooting happened, the murder happened, and hearing the stories of those men, 80% of them Black men, who said they all knew that police officer, and everyone in the neighborhoods did and knew to avoid that squad car. Anyways, there's so much. And then also working inpatient in a hospital, working in private practice on my own, all of these things, okay? I also, since being in my internship and because of my own connection to nature and the divine, I've always known that there was more to whatever Western psychology tells us or labels and pathologizes. And so we're going to get into the holistic approach as well today on what trauma is and what's really happening on a more collective social level. And the biggest point to that, so I want you to get through all of this so you can get these tidbits, is that Americans very much easily accept the narrative that they're the problem instead of recognizing that the environment that we are in is causing the mental health. And then we internalize and pathologize our own symptomology, even though symptoms are just an indication of what's happening in your environment. So we'll break that down more later. And what else? I think that's a good start. So we'll just get started. Please feel free to let me know any more questions in the comments. I can do a part 2. I can just make this an ongoing thing. I really want to debunk a lot of what people are saying about mental health or saying about trauma, and also connect some of these global social parasites, really, the different ways that we are institutionalized in our culture and how that's creating such a mental health epidemic. And I'm already getting emotional. I didn't realize I would. I'm very passionate about this, but I've really stepped away from, I let go of my license because of, I guess rebellion against the institutions of it. And I want to be able to, and I wanted the freedom to do the work spiritually, emotionally, holistically, that otherwise that wasn't accepted by insurances and by licensing. So, but it's very personal to me too. I come from a family chock full of trauma, poverty, extreme trauma. substance use disorders, early deaths, traumatic deaths, loss, poverty. And recently I've been talking to some family members more about our family, and I'm really inundated with the reality of how severe it is. And, I've been combating this my entire life. And as what some people would call the neurodivergent, the one who sees all the patterns, the empath who illuminates and reflects and notices what's wrong in the family system, or even just reflects it. It's not even a judgment. Even recently I realized I ask questions to collect data because I'm trying to understand. I'm not trying to judge. I'm not trying to assume I know better, but even questioning is a threat against the system, whether it's the family system or the social system, whether it's the system at your workplace. And when questions and curiosity are met with insecurity and suspicion, you can tell that you're dealing with an unconscious program, with somebody who is unconscious about their own understanding of life and themselves in life, because they don't quite have the capacity to look and to seek understanding because they're stuck in the suffering of it. And I want to drive that home before I go any further in this conversation. I'm really tired of everyone online putting out all this really one-sided messaging about narcissism, and really just driving home how bad they are, how evil they are, or someone with narcissism being just somebody to demonize. And I've never thought of that. I could not have sat in rooms with criminals, sex abusers, murderers. I could not have worked with people who want to kill themselves, or who are too scared to go outside. Who harm the people that they love, but who still show up because they're trying. They're trying to understand how and why they got to that space. And early in my own, formation, I've always wanted to be a therapist since I was 11. And I got my master's degree when I was 20 with a newborn baby. Well, she was 2 by the time I graduated. But as a single mom. So Maya Angelou quote that I had read, and it was something along the lines of, if somebody had the capacity to act in this certain way, then I too have the capacity under the right circumstances. And none of us are immune to that. None of us are immune to suffering or harm or acting out of lines to what society deems as acceptable. There is so much about rejecting the shadow. And hopefully we'll get to that too if I remember everything I'm trying to say right now. So excuse me if I don't get to everything that I'm talking about now. I'm just kind of letting it flow because that's how I am. And I don't have time to plan out a whole thing and follow a script and do all that. So if there's anything that I missed that you really wanted, again, put it in the comments, let me know, and I will make that video. Thank you. So knowing that life is fragile and we are fragile as human beings, it can be scary to think that that's within our capacity, or that we are vulnerable to being so unconscious or so in our woundings that we make decisions that we don't necessarily want to make or agree with. And that's just going to be true of what it's like to be a human being. And I think that suffering happens when we're scared of our humanity. I think we perpetuate suffering when we are too scared to look at how our shadows and how we then affect other people. And that's why forgiveness and self-forgiveness, compassion, I really say the two things to be the catalyst to end your suffering is compassion and presence. Because when you are sitting in compassionate awareness and presence within your own being, there is no projection or harm you can do towards another. I heard the story of Pema Chodron, who also is a very well-known spiritual leader, and that there was somebody who had come to her at a monastery that she was at, who had told her and confided in with her that this person was being sexually assaulted by one of the other members in the monastery, and she discounted this person and quieted them down until 10 years later or something. I don't know the details, but it came out more publicly, and she was named, Pema Chodron was named as one of the people who silenced her. And there's no judgment in any of that. I mean, there's a darkness to humanity and to the human psyche. And to really embrace what that means is to understand that there's a spectrum. And we don't have to accept it, and we don't have to like it. But to understand that there is a spectrum in everything that we have no control over. And that's scary. I get that. That's why we have compassion and presence. Because when we have compassion, we can understand why someone could, under certain circumstances, in their own frame of mind, with their own personal belief systems, with their own experiences in that certain time of history, in that particular setting, under those certain conditions, they moved forward with the decisions that they made and with the behavior and the consciousness that they did. You see, we're all doing that all the time. And if somebody says, oh, I'm enlightened and I've been enlightened, and I'm like, they act as if that's like a totality that just happens and then they're just forever enlightened, I call bullshit. Same is true if you feel like there's someone out there that's super professional, they're super put together, they're super perfect, or they seem to really have everything figured out and you kind of really look up to them. They're still a human being. They still have moments of struggle and their own learnings. So that's what we're here to do. It's not that we're here to experience a perfect life or an easy life, or it's not like we're here to experience, a sunny summer, perfect 70-degree day every day. It's just, we've lost and been disconnected from the duality of nature. We've been lost and disconnected from the reality of nature, which is flux. It is variability. It is the winter cold days and the sunny summers. It's the cycles, the seasons. It is the desert and the torrential rains. It is everything. And we are everything. All right, let me get back to the tangible PTSD diagnosing and 101 things that you came here to learn anyway. So I will try to put away my philosophical stuff for now, and we'll move along. First of all, it's really important to know that the way that people are diagnosed, at least in America, is with the DSM-5. That's the most recent. It actually might have been updated by now. So when I was still practicing, that was the most recent diagnosing manual. It has only been updated that 5 times since about 1910, when the first edition came out, and has always and only been written and edited by white psychiatrists. And when we remember that, it's because we need to know the history of where these diagnoses and the quantifiable idea of whatever it is we're measuring is coming from. Everything that we even speak about, that we label, that we use words, that we try to put into a box to explain and categorize is always going to be short-sighted. Because there is no way to get out of and to take out biases and your own perspective on life. So just remember that with anything, and still within the medical community and the scientific research, it doesn't mean that it's 100% correct. It means that there's a correlation between A and B, and the people who are assessing that data and looking at it, they get to choose what that data means, and then they share it with the rest of us. And so there is inherently imperfection in us trying to understand what's happening. And that's the Western way. So another important historical note I always like to talk about when it comes to the DSM, to early psychology, is Freud is considered the father of psychology. A lot of people know him as the one who does like the id, ego, superego, who understood the unconscious mind as in the different stages of like development, and them like the child being like penis envy or like jealous of the opposite sexed parent because of competition and things like that, and that we're always sexually motivated and things like that. So I'm not even going to go into that, but Freud, just so you know, this is another way you need to understand how our framework of understanding mental health has been influenced by social and political frameworks and influence. So in his earliest studies, he was working with people who were seen as mentally ill, who were in psychic hospitals, and he made the correlation pretty quickly, especially with the women, that the people who came in with what he coined the term as hysteria were sexually abused, and often severely or chronically over time sexually abused. And so what happens when especially a child or anyone experiences harm to their self and they are trapped in that situation, whether that be physically or even mentally coerced to believe that they're trapped, then the people will then, the mind will fracture itself because it dissociates and it breaks off a piece so that it can survive the situation without complete awareness. Like it's just the way that the mind will protect itself. And then those memories will often go underground but stay in the body and the psyche because it eventually will want to be integrated. But because that injury was so great in the moment, or it continues to happen, then there's no place or time or opportunity for remedy and protection. And if somebody does have something happen to them, even currently, the diagnosis for PTSD means that it has to be 6 months after the event that the symptoms continue and persist. Because there is this window of opportunity where if somebody is met with empathy, support, validation, acknowledgement, and remedy for whatever happened to them, then they will have then that experience will have closure. And then it will not become a PTSD diagnosis because those symptoms will go away because their psyche was acknowledged and recognized and seen, and they were supported emotionally. These PTSD symptoms arise when people have to suppress, pretend, and go on with life as if they weren't harmed. So back to Freud, he coined the word hysteria, which in Latin is connected to the Latin word of womb. So that's also a distortion. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but just so you know, it's one of the ways that women have been labeled as hysterical for their wounds and in a way that disempowered us and in a way that did not understand or acknowledge what was really happening. So when these patients of his were experiencing hysteria, he published an article in 1905, I believe, where he said, okay, these are the symptoms, and this is the cause. It is sexual abuse. And immediately, the people in his socio-political environment attacked him, threatened him, and said, if you do not retract this and change your findings, then we will come after you, basically. We will ruin your reputation. We will do whatever we need to do to silence you. Because he even acknowledged it was the perpetrators were throughout all of society. So doctors, lawyers, influential people, teachers, anyone in a position of power or authority or opportunity of having a victim, right? So if we could have, as Americans, or as the American culture in 1905 truly acknowledged that that hysteria, which is also, dissociation, causes personality disorders, PTSD, complex PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of this, right? That's caused by a traumatic event and lifelong trauma. If we could have acknowledged it then, what is that? 120 years ago, we would be so much farther along with our ability to treat these things because people still discount that and blame an individual for their mental health disorder instead of acknowledging the root causes. I mean, this seems to be the American way. It is the socio-political industrial complex that needs to continue operating the way it always has, siphoning from the people to maintain power, and so therefore it cannot acknowledge these deeper truths. Oh man, you guys, this is not fun to talk about. Usually in my videos I get very hyped up and excited, and I am not. I feel the heaviness of this, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. I know this probably isn't like super fun to even listen to. I know it, like I don't even like to listen to this kind of stuff anymore, but I don't know, I guess there's a reason it's coming through right now. But Yeah. So let me just take a moment. Spirit's just telling me to continue on. So make sure you're taking care of yourself during this. If you need to take a break and pause or whatever, of course, you do what you need to do. And I will do the same. Okay. So being that the DSM-5 is only written and used by psychiatrists, it also illuminates to the pattern within American society towards the medical model instead of a holistic understanding of the person. So Jung was one of the first to really break through and kind of maintain his stance on the psycho-emotional, spiritual experience of trauma and the separation of self and how to come back into integration, which is what he calls individuation. This is still not something that is often recognized in our medical community. And in about the 1950s, 1960s, there was a huge resurgence of psychedelic interest in America after acid was created by the chemist in Switzerland. And it was brought to America. Everyone was loving it. It was really bringing profound psychological insights. And even and then the medical or the helping community, the medical community and those working in mental health realms were acknowledging that there were profound growth in their patients and insights that they weren't able to get after years of therapy or even months with these people. And they were having them after one dosing, right? And one psychedelic experience. And then there was the mother of mushrooms. She was in Mexico, this indigenous woman, healing and doing ceremonies with her people in her village without any even capacity to speak the language because there's so many different dialects. But people started coming to her because she had such profound results. And so she was discovered by an American who then brought the news and they back to America, and there's this whole resurgence and hippie days, of course, for people to say psychedelics are amazing, mushrooms are amazing. And there was this period in time then where there was this pivotal time where America then had to decide, and I'm talking about the people of America saw this as such a benefit. And it was this revolutionary, exciting, opening, blossoming, just so beautiful time. Creativity and healing and all of this. But, of course, the sociopolitical tycoons turned that and shut it down real quick. We saw the war on crime start, the demonization and media being out there saying that acid and psilocybin were turning teenagers into misfits and causing crime and all of these things. And even people in the community, the medical community, who were having good results with their patients with these psychedelics, were shut down. The data was suppressed and it became illegal. So psychedelics then became illegal. I think it was 1963 or 1965. And so again, you're seeing that the public health and public policy is not interested in what's well for the society, and is not interested in society's opinion. And because if we get our own answers and remedies from a plant medicine that nature gives to us, then how can they make billions and billions and trillions of dollars on pharmaceuticals and mental institutions and hospitalization and surgery and all of this stuff, right? Illness is a huge, we already know this. It's just insane the amount of money that is in there. And so over these generations, with the media, even then, people were starting to turn on one another. Like the middle class started saying, oh, well, look, these Black folks or the young folk or the creatives, the artists, the musicians, look at how degrading they are to society and to themselves. They're wild and unkept, and they're risking all of these things, right? And so the political agenda is always to divide and separate different people in the system so that they then fight one another, and they don't have to do anything to us because we're doing it to each other. And this is really the long game. They're playing the long game. And we are just rats in the maze. Can we wake up? That's why we're doing these videos. Over time, we have been disconnected from our own true nature and nature itself. And I just really want you to know that the way that society is built is not conducive for your mental health. Kids growing up inside homes and not being outside with nature, all of us not being outside with nature, causes ADHD, aggression, confusion, lethargy. Nature even the dirt has antidepressants in it. When you hear the stream or the river or the trees and you get sunlight on your face, sunlight, the best medicine out there. Vitamin D. Most people in America are chronically deficient in vitamin D. And there's also this esoteric idea, and it's not even esoteric, it's actually biology, but whatever, is that when we become more comfortable in our lives, when we become more accustomed to comfort, temperature controlled rooms, we don't have to exercise, we can just take an electric bike now, or we can ride the motorcycle or take a car to work, all of these things. We don't have to farm our own food. We're not using our body to ensure our own livelihood. And what that's doing to us is creating this idea that comfort is to be celebrated, and any effort outside of that is actually the demonized idea. That we should not have to exert any effort. And in that, it's a really scary belief to accept, because if we accept that, we're going against our own very nature as a human being. You see, the human being really needs something to push against. It's just kinesiology, and we're finding out, as people are talking more and more about nervous system regulation. You see this in people who work out and athletes and who just understand the body and the mechanics of the body. We have different layers within our body of these different mechanisms. So we have muscle, we have fascia, which is all of the connective tissue from our muscle to our bones to the fats and all of the things that are in between. And we have our blood, we have our bones, we have all of these different aspects that all work together as a whole ecosystem. And when we don't exert force against a heavy object, if we don't till our own field, and if we're not hammering or chopping our own wood, we're not exerting force, we lose a part of ourselves. We really are losing a part of ourselves that then would have become resilient, because it is against, when we exert our own willpower and our physical power against something that we need to conquer, to remedy, then we are built stronger. Every time that, and that's why, for example, weightlifting is such a good thing for you, that we should all be weightlifting. Because when we weightlift, our bones break down in all these small, tiny little fractures. And the next day, it generates, within 24 hours, all of these new connections and all of this new growth. Literally sitting and making no movement is the silent killer. We are slowly wasting away. And our mind knows this. Okay, our mind knows this is where we're getting anxiety, depression, lethargy, anxiety. You have all this built up energy, and it turns into fear, and it turns into these distorted thoughts and stories that we tell ourselves, when the simplest answer is to just be alive. Connect back to your own experience as a human being. But we've been put to sleep. We've been, conditioned to believe that these comforts are what we want and what we desire, and that's the marketing of consumerism. So I say all of this to say that we are all socially engineered. We are social beings who need one another. We need connection. We need belonging. And it's belonging within our own authentic self. However, there's so many rules now about what a good person is. And if you have a good credit score, if you have a good job, or if, all of these things, if you have a nice car, there's all of these really detrimental ideas and ideals about what a good human being needs to have, and we're all fighting against that. We all know that that's bullshit, but then we also adhere to it and try to be it every day. It's a very interesting dichotomy. And so I'm saying this to say that anxiety, depression, mental health is not a thing that is not your problem. You're not in control of it. You can be if you want to be. If you wake up to the illusions that I'm speaking of. And that's what I teach here. So welcome to Drop Into Being, where you get to reclaim your own sovereignty from the system, and you want to know what it feels like to be alive again. The biggest barrier to that reality, to accepting to do this, is to have and accept that you have personal authority over yourself. Even though we don't like to admit it, we're all making the choices that we're making. And we're willing to accept where we are because we're willing to put up with it. And if we aren't where we want to be, then it's because we, somewhere in our mind, are okay with being where we're at. Where it fulfills some kind of idea or prophecy or belief that we have about ourselves. And so we have to dispel those programs that other people have put upon us that we have then accepted as true for ourselves. A great book is The Four Agreements. I would study it, read it over and over and over, and just melt it into your mind and your heart and really work towards your own mental clarity. And my 100-page journal that's coming up soon, and all the stuff that we're doing here at Drop Into Being is to do the same thing. It's to unshackle your mind. And so I'm here to remind you that one of the ways to start unshackling your mind is to stop adhering to all of the social programming that's happening. It literally means to unplug from the matrix, to find your creativity again, to exert your own life force against the world, and to do what you need to do to feel alive again in a way that actually nourishes your life and nurtures those around you and builds. And that's what a friend of mine calls regeneration. You know, he helped me go from desiring sustainability to regeneration, because sustainability is only sustainability, but then what? We want to regenerate. We want to build a whole new system. We want to create something that's not harmful, that we don't have to sustain from. It's not something that then, this is really returning back to the basics of what it means to be a human being on this planet. I say these things so that you can understand that mental health is not a sentence. It's not something that is some kind of diagnosis that you have to live with forever, that you have to accept as true for yourself. Of course, I'm not giving treatment advice. I'm not telling you to go off your meds. I'm not telling you anything. I'm not a doctor. Please don't. This is educational content only, or entertainment only. But I do want to empower you to consider that you are not who you've been told to be, and that your life force that's beating inside of your veins every single day is a gift, and that you can move that life force. You can initiate it once again. You can retrieve your soul. You can bring back all those parts of yourself that you've lost and that have been fractured in this lifetime. And we can integrate them again. And that also includes plant medicine. Those profound shifts in insights and the amount of new neural networks that get generated from plant medicine beyond what prescriptions can do. Prescriptions are mostly placebo effect. You believe it's going to work, so it works. And then because you believe it's working, then you start behaving in a different way that supports it. And then, for example, then you start going for a walk because you feel a little bit more inspired, or you feel more secure in yourself. And then that snowballs into you then going for a walk every day. And then the extra good feel-good hormones are rushing through you. And, we really do live in our own mental prison. But it's important to know who you are and what the world is, so that you understand the game that's being played. You see, this is what I teach. This is what we precisely teach here, is that to come into presence with yourself, to connect to the divinity above, within your own humanity right here, is the biggest shift, the most badass thing you can do for yourself. Because in this presence, in compassionate presence with who we truly are, we get to learn who we are, we get to integrate, we get to fade away, we get to finally face those things that we don't want to face about ourselves so that we can actually make improvements and move forward. And we can access divine instruction, advice, suggestions that actually comes from our own soul. So we're not like running around trying to follow somebody else's advice of what worked for them. And allowing these other people's ideas and values and ideas of the world to dictate then how we operate in our own world. That's disempowering. We give our power away to the system every single day. I see this in the birthing world as well, and I have so much to say on that, but it'll have to be another video. But when the institution is structured in a way that creates trauma for those who live within it, but then you're told that this is the way it is and that you were wrong for whatever you did to not perfectly mitigate whatever it is that you experienced, that is gaslighting, and that is the very definition of abuse. If we are not free to face our abusers and to then also have justice, which is a remedy to bring things back into balance, then whose law and order are we living by? Man's law. What is man's law? It's not natural law. Natural law says the only part of natural law is that you can't harm another person or being. However, you still have sovereignty and free will over your own life. You want to create a business over here? Do it. You want to farm without GMO food seeds? Do it. You want to live in the by the river in a van? Do it. We are being initiated into a path forward, a new way of living, new systems that are regenerative and not exploitative. That means recentering our humanity. It means remembering who we are as individuals and our divine right and sovereignty and our responsibility. When we have responsibility for ourselves, then we take care of ourselves much better. And then when we know how to take care of ourselves, then we take care of the people around us. We'll take care of our community. We'll do right and build the systems that we need, instead of just constantly fighting and yapping and putting energy and money wasting away trying to resist what is. Like, come on, let's just stop doing that. Let's just build our own systems. You don't like the schools? Then build your own in your neighborhood. Come back, find 4 or 5 families to buy land with. And you see, what happens in this is that all of then the distortions and the confusion comes out. And then we can see where we are missing compassion and presence with one another. Because then we start judging, and then we want to avoid, and we want to just, I know intentional communities are very hard to maintain over a period of time. And then we have to ask, are we really capable of having our own communities? Everyone wants to be a king or queen, but can you be the king or queen of your own dominion? Can you be in charge of who you are and who you want to be in the world? Maintain responsibility to your mentality and to your behaviors so that you then live in integrity with your values. I feel like I'm digressing from the Trauma 101, but this is really what's missing. Because what a broken society we have. When we know that so-and-so there's domestic violence in the house down there, but nobody in the neighborhood does anything to step in. When we see an elder go hungry and cold in the winter because nobody shows up for them. Like, what the brand new babies are being born and they're being harmed in the hospital. And then mothers and fathers are being told, oh, well, at least it's a healthy baby. And then moms go home traumatized and have postpartum depression so bad. And there's no village to support the family. Our society is sick. We are sick. And it's not our fault. This is the way it's been built to be for a very long time. But we can, and it is our responsibility to now say, I do not consent. I revoke my signature on this contract. I no longer engage in your contract law. I no longer engage with your contracts. But then again, that means that we have to be responsible for learning the skills to maintain our own self-dominion, which means whatever that means. Getting land, creating our own family trust, conflict resolution in our own communities, systems in place that nourish the community. And another thing I've thought, systems to take in all the homeless kids. Like, how many freaking extra rooms are in all of these houses in America, and you want to tell me that there's kids that are homeless, or anyone that's homeless? I mean, I understand that it would be terribly difficult and maybe beyond our capacity to have someone who's mentally ill, who's committed to the life of homelessness. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is something that's available to us, which is to take in someone in need, to help one another. And I understand that there's this profound individualistic mindset where people justify why we don't help each other, or everyone's stressed and overwhelmed and trying to just survive. Well, that's by design. And again, we decide what we are doing with our own energy force. You want true sovereignty? Take back your energy. Create energetic dominion, energetic sovereignty, energetic freedom. Pull yourself from the things that you're addicted to, the people that you're addicted to that are not good for you. And see where your growth points are. We all have to do this. This is just the truth of what it is to be alive right now. And I know it's scary. And I know that it's deep. But if we want to see through the illusion of mental health, you just have to go on antidepressants. There's nothing you can do. you're just, your grandma was like this and this and that, is called generational trauma for a reason. And babies come in, and there's so much happening in the energetic realm that we're not even discussing here. Like, it's carried down. Because babies just mimic. And then they're just taking in whatever's happening in their environment. So if you feel like there's anything that's inside of you that you don't necessarily appreciate, or behaviors that you don't want to engage in anymore, but it's kind of this, and I have some of that too, especially when it comes to parenting, especially when it comes to poverty and feeling like life has to be a struggle. I have these programs in me as well, and I shed light on them because I don't want them to control me. I don't want somebody else to be able to control me because they hit those trigger points. There's no shame in recognizing where those beliefs are that no longer help you. I often say one of the most important things on this path of awakening to this reality and taking back your own self-agency is self-honesty. We have to be honest with ourselves. And that's really hard to do because we're attached to the things that we desire, we want, and believe that those things are important to us and more important than these other things. And again, we have to really be diligent about comparing who we are, who we know ourselves to be in our own divinity, after shedding away all the layers that no longer serve us, all of the conditioning from family or whatever that we've accepted that really isn't helpful. And then we have to decide what kind of world we want to live in, and then move in that direction. Mental health and dis-ease and illness, although it's common, it's not normal. You're not doomed to live this way. It's been an hour, so I'm gonna go. I trust that you'll have found some wisdom in here. Please let me know in the comments how that went and how I can be of any help in the future. We'll talk soon.